children's programming on Iowa Public Television.
Photopic has been made possible by the ICU Society and the Nature Conservancy, leading the way in international conservation.
Is living in Iowa the same as living in the Horn of Plenty? I'm Morgan Halgren, and on this week's show, we'll see how one man serves 1,500 at his annual pre-Thanksgiving gathering in Corning. And we'll share the motion and emotion of the National Cornhusking Championship in Kimballton. Plus, take a living in Iowa and raptured look at Iowa's beautiful raptors. Watch Living in Iowa, always something a little different, tonight at 7:30.
We're talking sex, drugs, economics, and poverty, but our subject is children. Children having children. Health care and education for children. And the children in this country having a future they can look forward to. For too many of our kids, the system isn't working anymore. What to do? While the experts don't always agree, there are success stories. I'm Phil Donahue. Join me for a lively look at childhood in America.
Monday at 8 on Iowa Public Television.
Next time on Frontline.
This child died primarily of a fatal blow to the liver, which actually...
The brief life and brutal death of Adam Mann.
This, in fact, Your Honor, is a woman who has a lengthy history of abuse of her children.
You know, it's frustrating to see kids continue to be abused and nothing done about it. The system doesn't protect them.
Who killed Adam Mann? On Frontline.
Tuesday at 8 on Iowa Public Television.
Good morning. I'm Dean Borg, and we welcome you again to another Sunday edition of Iowa Press. Coming up at the top of the hour at 12 noon, we'll be discussing a topic that's become increasingly difficult for Iowans to comprehend and perhaps increasingly uncomfortable to deal with. That topic is racism in Iowa. More on that in just a minute. Coming up right now, though, is the McLaughlin Group from Washington, D.C. Host John McLaughlin and his vocal band of Capitol reporters will be discussing the profile of the election of '92, uncertainty in the White House and assessments of the field of challengers, and the economy as a political issue. Is it a recession or just a slow recovery, and the political fallout that goes with that? We'll hear about that and more with the McLaughlin Group. And then immediately following in Iowa Press, we'll be talking about the nature of racism in Iowa. How deep is it? What to do about it? And where do we go from here? Inga Mudbury-Langston, who is Executive Director of the Iowa Civil Rights Commission, and Senator Joe Welsh, a Dubuque native who's president of the Iowa Senate, will join us for their assessments. That's coming at the top of the hour on Iowa Press. I hope that you'll stay tuned. Right now, we head to Washington, D.C. in this Sunday's edition of the McLaughlin Group.
Securities Corporation of Iowa, with offices in Cedar Rapids and Waterloo, is committed to the thorough discussion of today's current events and proud to help bring you the Iowa broadcast of the McLaughlin Group.
From the nation's capital, the McLaughlin Group, an unrehearsed program presenting inside opinions and forecasts on major issues of the day.
GE is proud to support the McLaughlin Group. GE. From residential to commercial lighting, we bring good things to life.
Here's the moderator, John McLaughlin.
Issue 1, how do you spell relief? America's retailers are suffering through an anxious Thanksgiving weekend. It's 25 shopping days until Christmas, and Thanksgiving is the beginning of that season of high commerce. At the start of this 1991 season, a critical economic indicator, consumer spending is very low, the lowest in a decade. Quote, the sharp decline in consumer confidence over the past 2 months cuts across all segments of the population, all age groups, all income brackets, and all regions of the country, unquote. So says the respected Fabian Linden of the conference board. So Congress has now finally gotten into the act. Each party advanced a pump priming tax cut plan. At the last moment, President Bush signed on to the Republican plan with the knowledge that it was dead on arrival and dared the Democrats to take similar action. But Congress had one thing on its mind: to get out of town for the Thanksgiving holidays.
How much more we have to do, how soon we get out of here.
It is impossible for me to give you a definite, absolutely firm time.
The bottom line is that Congress is gone for the next 8 weeks, and it doesn't look good for government action to relieve the current national economic pessimism. How do you rate the federal government's performance in acting to stimulate a recovery, Eleanor Clift?
It's about as effective as the program to get Ling Ling, the giant panda at the National Zoo, pregnant. Lots of activity, very little result. And George Bush, in the space of 24 hours, lurched from wanting to do nothing to supporting a House Republican plan which is totally irresponsible Reaganomics supply side and says more about the right wing's hold on George Bush than any keen grasp of economics. And as far as I can tell, George Bush does not have any firm convictions or new ideas or beliefs when it comes to the economy. And I think what we're going to have to do here is wait it out until January, which actually may be responsible.
I think she's spinning that out a little bit. She's taking advantage of being the first.
That's right. Very rarely. Nobody interrupted me.
Well, I had that opportunity last week. And,
yeah, well, you blew it.
And I,
not untypically.
I droned on as well. But, Eleanor, you missed a lurch for Bush. He was against having any sort of a of a growth package. Then he was for it, but then he was against it later the same day. He had Treasury Secretary Brady up on Capitol Hill saying, don't pass the thing that the president publicly says you should pass today. So it was a pathetic performance. I mean, Bush was like the tennis ball in a tennis game being batted back and forth. You're right, he doesn't believe in anything, and but Congress really doesn't either. We had the recession most of the year, and neither side had an economic package. It's pathetic.
Jack, you have enough stuffing for Thanksgiving?
Here's a guy who looks like Jesse Raphael in drag, and he's making fun of me. Some viewer called and suggested I use that comparison.
Not bad.
There's one interesting thing about that. I mean, this has been a political dance in the last week on the question of a tax bill. The interesting thing to me is this is the first time that the Democratic leadership of Congress has begun to wake up and say, you know, there's a presidential election next year, and we might not lose it. It's possible we could even win it. And they've begun to act like a partisan group. And that's what they did by, first of all, threatening to come back, which they weren't going to do. Second, by setting up some hearings for the interim period so they can hold the stage a little bit. And the reason they're emboldened to do this is for the reason Fred was saying, that Bush has made such a hash of the thing.
To come out of the recession, Mort, you need to have a tax cut, it is said, and or you need to increase consumer spending. My question to you is a tax cut likely either before Christmas, or better still, is it likely next year, 1992?
Well, I would guess there will be some sort of a compromise tax cut, both for the middle class and maybe a partial capital gains tax cut.
In exchange for what? In exchange for increasing the top marginal rate from 31 to 35%?
And they'll cut the defense budget some more. But look,
are they going to increase the top marginal rate, 31 to 35%?
A little bit, yes.
A little bit?
A little bit. They're
next year?
John,
to be effective next year?
The thing is that if they're going to raise the top rate, the president will be tempted to veto it. And it largely depends on how the economy goes. Now, look, I
want to stay on this. Will the president veto an increase in the top marginal rate in exchange for, say, capital gains?
He cannot take another increase in the top rate. Look, Bush has to get the tax issue back. That is the issue that holds the Republican Party together. He has splintered the party by agreeing to a tax increase.
How does he get it back?
A year ago. He has to come in and be in favor of, he doesn't have to win, but he has to be in favor of a capital gains tax cut and a middle class tax cut. Both of those together, and that way he can meld the party together. He doesn't have
Eleanor,
to win.
Well,
there will be a middle-class tax cut, and the question is how you pay for it. And if it's paid for by raising the top rate, which I think is how the legislation will be framed, George Bush is in a box, because if he signs it, he loses the New Hampshire primary because it betrays his no new taxes pledge.
And that's why he can't sign it.
Right, but if he doesn't sign it, he endangers his re-election posture because most people in this country are looking for this kind of tax relief.
The bottom line here is that he will stand firm with some sort of a growth package that appeals to radical Republicans that the Democrats won't accept, and he'll stand firm in order to win New Hampshire primary. Just one second.
The bottom line is there won't be any tax bill.
No tax bill in 92?
The smartest commentary on all this was by Herb Stein, former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, who said that both the Democrats and the Republicans are playing short-term politics. The Democrats are trying to buy the middle class at the expense of the rich, and the president is trying to, and the Republicans are trying to stimulate the economy to get out of the recession, when what we really need is education and infrastructure and stuff like that, long-term economic plan.
Eleanor, the president and Mrs. Bush went Christmas shopping in Frederick, Maryland at J.C. Penney's, and he bought athletic socks and something else. Don't you think that's setting a good example by the president of the United States?
Well, I think that's his response to most problems is a photo op. At least he didn't go play golf.
Exit question. On a probability scale of 0 to 10, 0 meaning zero probability, 10 meaning metaphysical certitude, what's the probability of a tax increase by raising the top marginal tax rate, now at 31%, to say to 32, 33, 34, or 35 in 1992, to be effective in 1992? I ask you.
I think it's an 80% chance that we'll have Christmas in April.
What do you say?
80% that we're going to raise the top rate?
Yeah.
There's a 0% chance.
In 92?
In 92. That would be suicidal for Bush.
What do you say?
Yeah, I wouldn't
going to kill himself.
You say no?
I wouldn't say 0, never say never, but it's like a 1 or a 2.
What do you say?
He'll veto, and Congress won't be able to override, so it's 0.
Yeah, I don't think on the basis of this there will be a tax increase in the top marginal rate in 1992. Well, what's going to be done to get out of this recession? What action is Bush going to take?
Probably. He's not going to take any. There will be none none taken. Right?
There will be.
Because
There'll be
they will not be able to agree on anything.
Do you agree, Jack, that the Congress and the President both look terribly bad because now 8 weeks will elapse before Congress gets back into the act and the President does the State of the Union thing? Huh? Don't you think they look bad?
Of course they look bad, but look, the other thing is, the fact is there is nothing that Congress or they could have avoided looking so bad. There's nothing they can do in terms of short-term stimulus given the deficit situation anyway.
There you are. I think we all agree on that. We do all agree on that.
No,
we commend Jack.
I don't agree with that.
You don't?
I don't agree with
What
that.
could he do?
There's a lot he could get a capital gains tax cut passed, a middle class
He can't do it politically. That's what Jack means.
Well, you can't.
And he also
wait a minute.
And
Wait a
also
minute.
the political gains tax cut would take too long.
You're wrong, John.
It would not bring the quick
Let me tell
relief.
you how we can do it politically. The problem with George Bush right now is that he's afraid to fight. If he went out week after week after week and campaigned for a tax cut package and went to the American people and on television, he could get it passed, but he's a ninny.
He's afraid to fight for the wrong thing, and on that he's right. I think there will be a cut because they need a plan. They desperately need a plan to turn the psychology of the country
around. A cut but no increase.
No, I see a cut and an increase. I see everything. IRAs, capital gains. This is going to be a smorgasbord of every theory under the sun.
Before New Hampshire.
No, after New Hampshire.
After New Hampshire.
April.
Issue 2, report card time. The first session of the 102nd Congress is over, so what do we have? Well, we have the 1991 Civil Rights Act, $5.1 billion for the jobless, $151 billion for transportation, $500 million for the Soviet Union, plus most favored nation, MFN status, $95 billion for bank insurance, FDIC, and the savings and loan bailout, SNL. That's $70 billion for SNL and $25 billion for the bailout, respectively, and a pay raise for the Senate to catch up with the House, bringing both chambers up to $125,100 per year per member. Fred Bonds, please assign a grade to the Congress.
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is ignore your list. How you could come up with just the uninteresting things.
Tell us what's interesting.
Look, here's what's interesting. They didn't do anything on taxes or on crime. The bank reform bill became a re-regulation bill rather than a deregulation bill.
You mean they didn't expand the bank power?
No, they didn't.
Into securities activity, etc.
No, well, the main thing I thought they were going to do would be allow banks to be national banks, to
regionalize,
do business in every state, but they can't. They banned, here's something they did that is of interest to a lot of people, a lot more than that junk you mentioned, and that is they banned those automatic dialed sales calls that you get during dinner time, you know, that you don't want, they can't do those anymore, but you left out the most important thing, and that is Congress reinforced this negative impression of itself through the kiting the checks at its bank and not paying its restaurant bills and spurred interest in term limits.
Well, we were talking there about legislative performance, but I'm very glad, Fred, that you've saved us from ourselves once again by telling us about the total performance of the Congress.
I do my part, John.
Yeah, would you want to...
I want to make one point. The transportation thing is not that much in the next year. That's a 5-year figure, I think. I mean, I don't think
6 year.
6 year. They're not that profligate. What is interesting is how
profligate, is that the word you're going to use, John?
How reactive that whole the things you cited, the whole Congress has been to things, the SNL bailout and the banks, so with reactive to that, reactive on civil rights to the court. They're reactive. They don't initiate anything anymore.
If the Democrats had been really interested in economic growth, they would have passed a highway bill last January when the president first asked for it, or right after Desert Storm when he asked for it again. They still haven't passed an education bill. They won't give him, the president, what he wants in education. They're still going back to the deep, dark past of the teachers, appeasing the teachers' union. I don't think it's a very good performance at all.
It's tough to defend Congress, but I'm going to do it. I think they did the best they could with what little they have.
You're
talking
about legislatively.
Yes, they have no money to spend.
Right.
They're cleaning up after the wreckage of the 80s. They had to put all the money into the FDIC, the bank bailout, and the SNL bailout. And the president really doesn't have a legislative agenda to brag about up there. All he does is say no.
Why don't you assign a grade to the legislative performance of the Congress that does not include check kiting or the Cranston matter or any of the other gross deficiencies of the Congress?
I give them a B-. They can't get around the Bush veto, so there really isn't much they can do.
Eleanor, you have lurched into the truth.
No, she hasn't. You have to...
It's a B-.
No,
I'm telling
wait a minute. I rate Congress on what they didn't do, because the less they do, the better. I'd give them a C.
What do you think?
Well, I'd give
exclusive of misuse of privilege.
A gentleman's C for everybody except Simpson and Gingrich, let's say.
You give them a C?
Yeah. What do you give them?
I give them a C.
The answer is
C minus.
No, Eleanor's right. It's a B minus. That's issue 3, hot in Haiti. The situation in Haiti is nearing critical mass. President Aristide is still in exile since his overthrow by the Haitian army 2 months ago. The Organization of American States, the OAS, has failed to return Aristide to power. Haiti's disastrous economy, with its pervasive poverty and unemployment, is now crushing under the weight of a hemispheric trade embargo. This, combined with the fear of the army, has caused a mass exodus. In the past month, over 5,000 Haitian refugees have taken to the open sea in makeshift boats and rafts, desperately trying to reach the United States. Under a 1981 agreement between the U.S. and Haiti, these boat people are classified as economic migrants, not political refugees. A political refugee, by the way, is someone fleeing political repression, as opposed to economic hardship. The economic migrants, classified as such, are denied entry into the U.S. At Guantanamo Bay, the U.S. naval base in Cuba, a tent city has been set up to shelter thousands of refugees until their status is finally determined, whenever that day may be found to be.
If we were able to send those Coast Guard cutters back out, they would find as many or more people out in the Windward Passage or ready to leave Haiti now as we have here now.
Critics, including Congressman Charles Rangel, say the administration's handling of the Haitian exodus smacks of racism.
If these refugees were European, we would not have this discussion right now.
Is Rangel right, Mort Kondracke?
I think he is partly right. We complain about the fact that in Hong Kong they're throwing Vietnamese boat people back into Vietnam. We're doing exactly the same thing here.
And the U.S. government condemned that policy.
Exactly. And you know what I think is really going on here is that George Bush is afraid of losing Florida in the next election and doesn't want to have a repeat of the Mariel boat lift, which torpedoed Jimmy Carter by having, you know, thousands and thousands of poverty-stricken refugees pouring into Florida. You mean that the president
is politically motivated in his public policy?
Refugees, yeah.
What do you think?
I don't think there's a, number one, the Mariel boat lift is not what did Carter in down there. Number two, I don't think that...
didn't help.
It didn't help. I don't think that Bush is specifically afraid of Florida. I think, he couldn't get beaten there with a stick. But I do think the fact that these are black people and poor people, but poor black people, in terms of general American politics these days, being on their side is poison.
You mean if they were white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, or if they had access to oil revenues?
If they weren't black, or if they had oil, either
John,
one.
We have a moral obligation to these people. Look, we have backed an embargo that has made the economy grind to a halt there. These people are fleeing not only for that reason, but also because they fear for their lives. It is ridiculous for us to say that they can't come into the United States.
Rangel is proposing a temporary residency until political stability is restored to Haiti. Not full refugee status, which would leave them here indefinitely, but until that time, and then they could go back. That's what he's proposing. Don't you think some provision should be made for that, Ellen?
I think that's the least we could do, and we really have changed the whole face of immigration laws recently. It used to be, give me your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Now we want them to have the right color skin and have job skills.
At week's end, unnamed high Pentagon officials warned that if the Haitian mass exodus and political turmoil worsens, the only solution may be U.S. military intervention. Let's take a closer look at this possible hotspot. Haiti, Caribbean Republic. Distance from U.S., 600 miles. Distance from Cuba, 50 miles. Size, 11,000 square miles, the size of Maryland. Location, on the Caribbean island of Hispaniola, which it shares with the Dominican Republic. Population, 6 million. Capital, Port-au-Prince. Per capita income, $350 per year. Repeat, $350 per year as compared to U.S. $21,000 per year. Religion, 80% Roman Catholic. Language, Creole French. Army, 7,000. In power 2 months since the September 30 coup. Head of state, President Jean-Bertrand Aristide. Haiti as compared to Grenada. Size, Grenada, 1/100th the size of Haiti, which is the size of Maryland. Population, Grenada, 85,000. Haiti, 6 million. Military action in Haiti is necessary. Will it be a repeat of Grenada? Will it be son of Grenada? I ask you, Freddie.
I wanted to hear about what foodstuffs they export. How come we didn't get any of that?
Very funny, Fred.
We're not going to get Grenada again. for two reasons. One,
we're not going to get Grenada again unless Bush is behind in the polls.
Oh, come on. We're not going to get... The point is, it
Don't
wouldn't
give me
be Grenada because you wouldn't have anybody to fight. That army's not going to fight American forces. If we sent troops in, they just go in and take over.
And who would we rescue? I mean, as far as I read American policy, we don't want any of the people there. We would have to...
No, they take them back.
Right, exactly.
If we could get the OAS to do this and have a minimum number of American troops, it would be a terrific thing to do.
You mean us and the Organization of American States?
Yeah, for Venezuelan troops and Bolivian troops.
Do you have any reason to believe
there instead of American troops?
Do you have any reason to believe that those bozos at the OAS would do anything?
I doubt it.
You doubt it?
I doubt it. Embargoes are as far as they can go.
There are all kinds of justifications for going in there and stabilizing that government or stabilizing a government. We've done it in a lot of other places. But I think we will not do it either.
As you view the Haitian situation with your far-darting eye, do you see the use of military force on the horizon? What's the probability, 0 to 10? 0 probability, 10 meaning absolute certitude.
0.2.
0.2?
Right.
Less than 1%. What do you say?
Oh, 1 or 2.
1 or 2? What do you say?
Yeah, I agree with that.
1 or 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, you remember Grenada, Jack?
Yeah, I remember.
When you predicted that there'd be it was ridiculous for us to even be doing it on television. The following week, according to my prediction.
That's right. It was the conquering Grenada was the rough equivalent of defeating Allentown, Pennsylvania.
What do you
But it was
say?
worth it.
Use of military force with the OAS.
Wishful thinking, 15%.
15%? I was thinking about 10%. That's 1 out of 10. And issue 4, Field of Dreams. One candidate in the 8-member Democratic presidential field has leapt ahead of the pack. Last weekend at a meeting of Democrats in Chicago, Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton wowed party regulars and the press. 5 other declared candidates were also on display. Jerry Brown, Tom Harkin, Bob Kerrey, Paul Tsongas, and Doug Wilder. But Clinton seized the moment with his vision of reform for health care, for education, for welfare. He also called for middle-class tax relief. Fewer than 4 months remain before the Iowa caucuses. Would you please handicap the Democratic field now, Jack Germond? Was that overstated about Clinton, by the way?
It was a little... maybe a tad, but no, I'll tell you, this was a very... I mean, you still have a field of vice presidential possibilities in another year. Nonetheless...
you mean these guys may be planning for 1999?
No. I mean, these people are not well enough known to be big figures in the party and big figures with the populace. Nonetheless, Bill Clinton has improved steadily. He's always been a learner. He's improved steadily. And at the Chicago meeting, he showed that he has his message honed to a fine point. And what was interesting about this is he was dealing with people who would have ordinarily been not hostile to him, but suspicious, dubious about him because of his connections with the Democratic Leadership Council.
Were you there?
Yeah, and he knows what he knows what he wants to say. And the other thing is he's talking about things that a lot of astute politicians. He has a message. Think the Democrats need to do.
Do you think that Kerry is falling a little bit below expectations and possibly even a little bit flat?
Well, Kerry so far has not. I mean, Kerry, the word of mouth, the credential for Kerry is supposed to be that he's a charismatic politician. If you're a charismatic politician, you got to show charisma, and he hasn't done that yet.
What about Wilder, Doug Wilder, the black governor of Virginia?
I think those two, the two you've mentioned, and Tom Harkin are the only ones that are in it right now. Wilder and Paul Tsongas, unfortunately, and Jerry Brown, less unfortunately, have not crossed the threshold of credibility.
But aren't you hearing that Paul Tsongas has done a good job organization-wide in New Hampshire, and that may show well in New Hampshire?
Yeah, but I'm saying he has not yet established himself as a plausible national...
Is Clinton very far out in front?
No.
Well,
what do you think?
Well, there's no way for anybody to be out in front now. I mean, impressing a bunch of Democratic state chairmen is important, but we're more than 2 months before
you got to see the tea leaves there, pal.
I
want to hear from
Eleanor.
Clinton is one of the few figures in the party who can talk. Clinton is one of the few figures in the party who can talk about this year's hot-button issue, and that's welfare reform. He has a credible record on welfare reform. You could call it tough love.
Yeah, how's he going over with the women, Eleanor? I mean, politically, so to speak.
He's charismatic, and I think he goes over well with men as well. Exactly.
So you're now favoring Clinton over your old favorite Kerry?
Well, I think Kerry has failed to show himself. He has not distinguished himself. He's wispy.
Clinton is the one real 21st century Democrat in this field so far, with loads of reform ideas, as opposed to somebody like Mario Cuomo. What was interesting in Chicago is how disdainful they were of Mario Cuomo, who is now, in addition to everything, all his other burdens, got to worry about condoms being passed out on every street corner in Aurora.
One-word answer, very fast. Who looks best as the Democratic candidate? Who would be the strongest Democratic candidate of the announced field?
Clinton, but if Cuomo gets in, it's a Cuomo-Clinton contest.
Kerry is still the best chance to beat Bush.
Clinton.
Clinton?
Clinton.
Clinton, the answer is Clinton. Buchanan will declare his candidacy for the presidency on December the 10th. What kind of a vote will he get in New Hampshire, percentage-wise?
27%.
Wow.
Last time you asked that, I said 20. Now I say 30.
30.
32.
32.
32.5.
Answer, 35. Next week, Pearl Harbor, 50th anniversary. Happy Hanukkah. Bye-bye.
GE is proud to support the McLaughlin Group. GE. From plastics to financial services, we bring good things to life.
Public affairs programming continues on Iowa Public Television as we present Iowa Press with host Dean Borg, coming up next.
Racial intimidation rears an ugly head in Iowa in the form of cross burnings, and the state begins to adjust to the shock. We get assessments from Inga Bunbury-Langston, Executive Director of the Iowa Civil Rights Commission, and Senator Joe Welch, President of the Iowa Senate, today on Iowa Press. But first, Iowa's Democrats had an opportunity to assess 6 presidential candidates in Iowa to woo the caucus vote. Observing the proceedings, Mike Glover of the Associated Press and David Yepsen of the Des Moines Register.
David, a lot of Iowa Democrats got something of an early Christmas present. They got to look at their party's presidential candidates. They didn't get them all into their living rooms, but at least they had dinner with them. And I think what we saw is what we've known all along. Iowa Democrats are going to vote for native son Tom Harkin overwhelmingly. I think what we also saw is they're willing to look at the messages these other candidates are throwing out there. The question is, are they going to get a chance to hear them? We had a lot of this delicate kind of a feeling around by these candidates. Delicate's not a word we use often in this business. But I think they've made no decisions yet. I think there's an outside possibility a couple may come in late, make a little splash and try for a second, but I don't think we'll know until the first of the year.
I think it's going to be very difficult for any of these campaign managers to decide what they want to do in Iowa until Mario Cuomo makes up his mind. And even then, they have to do a little polling and sorting this thing out. It'd be very difficult to attack Tom Harkin in his own home state. For one thing, you have to get 15% of the vote before any of it gets counted. For another, the voting procedures are controlled by a bunch of Harkin people. And, you know, a campaign manager for another candidate takes one look at the set of rules and says, wait a minute, I'm better off spending my resources in New Hampshire.
And one thing we're finding is that none of them have the resources that they had a few years ago to throw around and splash everywhere. They're all pretty cash-starved.
Yeah, and one thing, too, conventional wisdom, as we're describing it here, can change very quickly, and we may see a very last-minute television campaign, for example, in this state.
We've never claimed to be conventional or wise. For Dave Yepsen, I'm Mike Glover, and that's our insight.
Major funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends of Iowa Public Television. This is the Sunday, December 1st edition of Iowa Press, with today's guest, Inga Bunbury-Langston, Executive Director of the Iowa Civil Rights Commission, and Senator Joe Welch, President of the Iowa State Senate. Here is Dean Borg.
Hello and welcome again to another edition of Iowa Press. First, a programming note. Last week at this time, we'd hoped to have Democratic candidate Jerry Brown with us in Iowa Press. The snowstorm of last weekend inconvenienced just about everyone, including the former governor of California, and we hope to have Governor Brown join us at a later time. Now, this week, we had scheduled Representative Dave Nagel from Iowa's 3rd Congressional District, but because of the timely importance of this week's topic, Congressman Nagel has agreed to join us next Sunday. Iowa Press today reflects on what's been in the news. It's racism in Iowa. Over the past few months, we've learned several things about racism and about ourselves. First, we've learned that Iowa is not exempt from the ravages of racism. Over the years, we've conditioned ourselves into perhaps believing that Iowa is immune from such things, but sadly now we know we're not. Second, we've learned that ugly racial incidents will get Iowa in the news in a most unfavorable light, as witnessed by front-page coverage in newspapers such as the New York Times, and be included in topics of discussion on nationally syndicated talk shows such as Donahue. That happened too. It's an image that embarrasses Iowa. Third, we've learned and are still learning that even if racial incidents are stamped out, that doesn't mean racism in Iowa has ended. We'll explore the topic with two individuals who are particularly close to the situation at hand. Senator Joe Welch is president of the Iowa Senate. He's a native of Dubuque. And Inga Bunbury-Langston is executive director of the Iowa Civil Rights Commission. Also joining us, Dave Yepsen of the Register and Mike Glover of the AP.
Senator Welch, there's been a lot of attention to your home city in the last few weeks. Why don't you take this opportunity to tell the rest of the state what's happening in Dubuque, what's going on up there?
Well, I think there has been a lot of national attention, and it's been unfortunate in one aspect that really a small minority of young men in that city have taken it upon themselves to go out and criticize a racial integration plan that was being proposed by the city council. But let me emphasize that this group of young men have been in trouble over the years.
Well, if I interrupt for a second, I don't think we're talking about criticism in the normal political sense. We're talking about burning crosses and all kinds of ugly, racially charged incidents.
Well, let me finish in saying that these gentlemen have been in and out of the jail system, and they have been arrested numerous times, and they have caused a lot of trouble in the Dubuque community. And all of a sudden, they're looking at this plan that was proposed by the city council or being looked at by the city council, and they're using that as justification for their past activities. And they are the individuals who have been burning crosses throughout the city. They've received national attention. There have not been the violence and the fights that have been portrayed in the national media. I think there are individual incidents, and I, as a legislative leader, the Dubuque community, the city council, law enforcement officials have no time for these criminal activities that these individuals are doing. They're going to prosecute to the fullest extent, and I think that it's going to be underhand
What
shortly.
I hear you saying is that these are bad apples in the community who just happen to hit an inflammatory chord.
That is correct. I think that they're using that plan to justify the problems that they have been causing over the past few years.
But, Director, isn't that what we always hear when something like this happens? Let's just ignore it. It's just a handful of bad apples, and let's don't think we've got a real problem there. Isn't that the standard line?
I think that has been used in the past. However, in working in Dubuque, having gone to Dubuque, I think that they have admitted that there is a long-standing problem in Dubuque, be it with a minority of people, but in talking to the city and community leaders, they have acknowledged that there is a problem in their town. And I think that acknowledgement is a step in the right direction. When I travel around the state, as a result of hearing about incidents, when I meet with city and community leaders, there is absolute denial that there isn't a problem. And what I've heard from Dubuque is that there is a problem and they're trying to work on it. And that's how the constructive integration plan was developed. There was a cross burning 2 years ago, and they decided to do something proactive, and that has developed the constructive integration plan.
So in other words, Dubuque is ahead of other communities because they're willing to admit they have a problem, in your mind?
I think so.
Senator Welch, why Dubuque? Why does Dubuque have this problem? We've also heard of instances of gay bashing in that community. What is it about your hometown that it creates a chemistry of intolerance here?
I don't think that there's a chemistry of intolerance in Dubuque.
You picked the word. You've got a problem. You've admitted it. Why is my question.
Well, I think the city is moving ahead and trying to bring about cultural diversity within the community. And I think that they've been working on it. Dubuque is probably, in my opinion, obviously I'm from there, one of the finest cities in this state. I think we've come a long way from the 1980s where we had huge unemployment and depressed economy. But we have community leaders and individuals, state officials, federal officials that we've worked with in trying to bring about changes in the city, and we're trying to push for cultural diversity. And I think it's probably one of the only cities in the nation that's come forward with a plan such as the task force that was appointed by the city council.
Director, same question. Why Dubuque?
First of all, let me say, looking at the state historically, since I've been at the commission, Dubuque is not the only city that has been torn with this tension and strife. In 1986, the Iowa Civil Rights Commission started identifying a trend, and that was an increase of hate crimes and bias-motivated crimes. Dubuque is not by itself, and certainly we know about the recent incidents in Waterloo, Iowa, and Jefferson. So I think it's not fair to isolate and point out Dubuque specifically.
Can we broaden the question to why Iowa?
Why Iowa? And I don't think Iowa is the only state that is suffering this, that is going through this. I think historically, when there has been an economic decline, people have a tendency to act out, take out their frustration. During the middle 1980s in Iowa, we had a lot of right-wing extremist groups, paramilitary groups coming into Iowa.